Hi everyone, welcome to Maximum Attack Rallying. Finally, he has done it. Takamoto Katsuta has won a WRC round after competing in the top category for the last few years. It was such a huge moment at the weekend, wasn't it, for him, who obviously could not contain his emotion as he reached the finish of the power stage. And I'm sure many of you will agree with me that it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, and I'm sure there are a few tears amongst those watching as well. I think Katsuta's had us on a bit of a roller coaster over the years, hasn't he, with ups and downs. He's come close a few times, but things have never quite come together. But I think there was almost universal happiness across the service park that he's finally won a WRC round. I think even Andrew Wheatley, the team boss of Hyundai, said that it would be nice to see him winning the event. So that's a big moment, isn't it? He said that before the end of the rally. So for a rival team boss to say he wanted to see Katsuta win, that's big, isn't it? That is big stuff. Yes, of course, there was plenty of luck for Katsuta. Oliver Solberg, Elfyn Evans, Sebastian Ogier all retired from the rally on Saturday, which was a big help for his chances. But that said, I don't think that should take anything away from Katsuta's victory. The Safari is one of those events, isn't it? It is the toughest rally on the calendar, and it is one of those rallies that it is about attrition, it is about survival and getting to the end. And, I think that's shown, isn't it? Because Katsuta didn't set a single fastest stage time. And that shows the challenge of the Safari and the challenge of this Safari, which was extremely wet and muddy and challenging, especially on Saturday. And, yes, you could say, well, he wasn't very fast, but setting fastest times is slightly irrelevant if you don't finish, which is what happened to the top three. So, I don't think we can take anything away from him. I also think it's really important to say that this could be a particularly defining moment for Katsuta. I don't think he will ever win a world title. I don't think he's on that level. But I also think, now he's got that monkey off his back, now he's got the first victory, I think that could potentially take some of the pressure away. And, I think that could allow him to go on to win more rallies. I think you could actually argue that we saw similar with Elfyn Evans. He came close a couple of times in the past, and when he did get that get that first victory back in 2017 at Rally GB, he had a little bit of luck. He was the driver on the DMAC tyre that was particularly suited to the conditions that year, and he used that to his advantage, and he took the victory. And from there, he was able to really push on and up his level, and has become a proper contender. So I think we could say the same for Katsuta. As I said, I don't see him as a championship contender, but I do think this could be the opportunity for him to push on. And I wouldn't be surprised if we now see him as a regular winner. Maybe winning a couple of events per year and being a bit closer to the top on a regular basis. I think it's also important to remember that this wasn't an easy rally for Katsuta and for Aaron Johnston. Yes, they had some luck with the top three retiring, but they had plenty of challenges of their own. They had intercom failure on the very first stage on Thursday. There was a double puncture on Friday. So they overcame their own trials across the weekend, but they kept going. They kept their heads down. They did what they had to do. They managed to guide their Yaris through all of the drama across Friday and particularly across Saturday, and they were the crew that was in the right place to pick up the winner's trophy. And I think sometimes that is how you have to be, isn't it? Particularly on an event like a Safari, particularly when the conditions are challenging like that. It was a weekend very much of survival. I've already talked about how the top three drivers all retired on what was an incredible Saturday for Toyota, albeit for all of the wrong reasons. So, this was a really difficult rally. Elfyn Evans, I think he was the first to go, wasn't he, on stage 13. He had to pull over after his rear suspension had failed. He had a puncture on the previous stage, which had apparently done some damage to that car already. That left Ogier and Solberg, who were continuing to fight. It had been a really, really good battle between the two of them. Solberg had been pushing surprisingly hard, I must say, but again showed absolutely incredible pace. And then we had this bizarre moment, didn't we, where both Ogier and Solberg retired their cars on the road section following stage 13. So that was the same stage where Evans had retired. Those guys had to retire after it on the road section back to service. I think both cars were suffering from alternator problems. Obviously we had lots of mud and lots of water on Saturday that had got into the alternators of both cars. Solberg was also, I believe, struggling with a transmission issue, so he lost drive, and that put pay to his weekend. So, you know, this was not part of the plan for Toyota, was it? This was an extremely difficult situation, put the three top cars out of it, and they were expected to dominate, weren't they? I had predicted they would dominate, and I think a lot of other people had, and for all three of those cars to be put out of action on Saturday was a stunning development, wasn't it, in what was a particularly difficult day. You know, and it's a shame, wasn't it? It was a shame for Toyota because on pace they were miles ahead. I think it was Adrien Fourmeau. He was the only non-Toyota driver to set a faster stage time. I think that was on Saturday. He was on his way to second place, wasn't he? So you have to say that was a good result for him in the circumstances. But, you know, the usual rock-solid reliability of the Toyotas was a bit of a letdown with this alternator issue, and that allowed Hyundai to at least get one car on the podium. Just before we get too much into Hyundai, though, I should say that there were other reasons for Toyota to be cheerful, as well as Katsuta winning. Sami Pajari, he had another good weekend. I think he won 5 stages on his way to third place overall behind Fourmeau. And obviously, you know, Ogier, Solberg, Evans dominated the times on Sunday once they got going again. Oliver Solberg took Power Stage points and Super Sunday, I think he did, didn't he? So, you know, they reminded everyone that they had the fastest car by miles, and if it hadn't been for these issues on Saturday, that they would have very much won. You know, it could potentially have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for Toyota, couldn't it? It was the level of pace was still that high. In championship terms, all of that means that Evans still leads the championship. He is on 66 points. He's 8 points ahead of Oliver Solberg, and Katsuta's victory moves him up to third place in the standings. He is on 55 points. Moving on to Hyundai then, as I said, Fourmeau was second, which was a good result. As I said, he was also the only non-Toyota to set a fastest stage time. It wasn't a bad weekend either for the slow and steady Esa-Pekka Lappi. He had very much been told to bring that car to the end, and that was the right decision. With Katsuta not registered for points, he effectively finished third in terms of scoring manufacturer points. So that was helpful for Hyundai, who've obviously not had the best start to the season, while Toyota are apparently running away with it. And that means that although it wasn't a complete disaster in point scoring terms for Hyundai, the gap in the manufacturers is still 43 points already, I do believe. So there is a big gap there, and you know, it didn't hide the fact that the Toyota is still massively faster, and the fact that the i20 had some reliability issues of its own across the weekend. Thierry Neuville, he retired after a drive shaft was damaged when he hit a stone on Saturday. But really, I think the big issue for Hyundai was overheating. You know, we saw all of their cars overheating at various points during the weekend. The radiators and cooling packs were getting clogged up with mud, and that's not good, is it? You know, this was the first time we'd seen the Evolution version of the i20 Rally 1 at Safari, and you know, that was not good. You know, with the previous version of the car, we saw issues with the drivetrain, with drive shafts and things breaking. Now we're seeing issues with cooling. I think the solution, as I understand it, was for every car to be fitted with a small compressor and pressure washer, so that they could clean out the cooling packs periodically to get rid of the mud. Now, that is an epic bodge. You know, that is a proper rally style finding a solution to a problem. But you know, it is not a sign by any means that the Evo version of the i20 is up to scratch, and you would think that something like that would have been planned for. But you know, it shows, doesn't it? It shows the challenge of the Safari Rally, and it was a difficult weekend for Hyundai, but they did at least get 2 of the 3 cars to the end, even if they weren't there on pace, and they did pick up some manufacturer points. So there are reasons to be cheerful, but you know, ultimately, when it comes to speed, they are still a long way behind. So there is still lots and lots of work to do. Wrapping up the Rally 1 stuff, we should talk about M Sport. Not a particularly good weekend, but there were a couple of things worth mentioning. So John Armstrong finished in 15th place, so a long way off. I think he lost something like 40 minutes across the weekend. He did manage to drag the Puma to the end without super rallying, though a 40-minute deficit is anything but ideal. That said, I think there were still positives for Armstrong. He showed plenty of resilience, for one thing. You know, he showed his ability to fix the car when things went wrong, which is something that the team have been working on with him. So there were good signs there, you know, compared to Josh McAlean, who had an absolute nightmare of a weekend. You know, there was overheating issues for him as well, transmission problems, punctures. Josh had all of it. He was eventually forced out of the rally because the engine of his Puma ingested water. I think that was on Saturday afternoon, so he couldn't restart on Sunday. So that was his weekend over. I think the issue is that the high point for Josh was a joint 3rd fastest time, I think it was, on stage 6. But even that was overshadowed by Armstrong, who was 2nd fastest on stage 13. You know, it's hard not to feel, I think, at the moment, isn't it, that the brighter star in the M Sport camp is Armstrong, and that he is impressing a little bit more than McAlean right now. So it's going to be interesting. I've said this in previous videos. It's going to be interesting to see how that develops across the season. But you know, I think you have to say that if things carry on as they are, McAlean is going to find himself coming under a bit of pressure from Armstrong, who seems to be doing a really good job right now, considering his lack of experience in that car. Let's finish up with WRC2, though. That was won by Robert Verves. He finished 5th overall because there was so much carnage in the top category. I think, like Katsuta, he didn't win a single stage, but he did do enough to finish ahead of Gus Greensmith and Fabrizio Zaldivar. One interesting thing I will say about WRC2 is that it seems that all of the top Rally 1 runners hit trouble, but the attrition rate in WRC2 was not anything like as high. Romet Jurgensen, he was forced out, but apart from that, all of the other top crews made it to the end of the rally. And I think that's interesting. Is yes, the guys at the front in the Rally 1 cars are the superstars and are pushing super hard, but you know, WRC2 is no picnic, and they would have been pushing as well. But I think it's a fascinating contrast, and it makes you wonder, are the Rally 2 cars in some ways actually more resilient and more durable than their Rally 1 counterparts? I don't know. It's an interesting question, and maybe one worthy of further research. But I thought that was interesting that we didn't see the same level of attrition amongst the top runners in WRC2 as we did in the top category. Anyway, I'm going to stop rabbiting on because I'm aware that this video has become a little bit of a long one, so I will stop talking. Do let me know in the comments below what you think. Did your predictions come true? I can't think many people predicted that Katsuta was going to win, though Bob Irvin from Rally Sport News is proudly saying that he did, so well done to him. At least I very much got my predictions wrong. So let me know in the comments below about that and about any other thoughts you have over the weekend. Other than that, I will just say thank you as always for watching. Make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons, of course, and I will see you again in the next video.